Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Theater of the Golden Silence podcast. Your tickets have been taken, and we are set up on a one-way trip to Comedy Town, with a short layover in Fort Lee, New Jersey, as most podcasts are often wont to do. But as a little pre-show prefacing, I wanted to give you a little explainer of why this episode exists. After looking at the title and the stars, I know what you're thinking. Another Mabel and Fatty short? Didn't you just do that, you ask? Yes, we did do that. But, there is an explanation as to the merits of running back a Mabel and Fatty short. You see, this little audio journey we call the Golden Silence podcast is an incredibly long and winding road through the past. There's always so much to dig into, so much to watch, to read, to learn. And with that being said, there are so many shiny things out there to capture our attention. And when those fascinating things get even more fascinating, when you change the lens through which you view a particular piece of art. For this episode, I wanted to look past the marquee names of 1916's He Did and He Didn't, and give a bit of the shine to some unsung heroes of silent film. The names and places whose impact in the silent world was significant and impactful, but they just didn't get the recognition and mainstream notoriety in the centuries since they did this work. Before we get too far into this short-ish episode, let's take a look at the social media hotspots of this little podcast. If you're an Instagram fan, look up Golden Silence Cast for the most up-to-date info on the podcast goings-on. And for the Twitter users out there, just punch in @GoldenSilence1, or just search for Golden Silence Cast and you will find us. Both internet locations will get you behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode details, and other fun, silent film-related stories of all kinds. And while we're on the topic of technological wonders, we can't forget to talk about Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're checking out this show on either of those apps, please leave a review and a rating. Each star rating and written blurb helps immensely. They will get the show more exposure and make the best of those pesky internet algorithms. Now, as we move forward with the episode, we will talk a little bit about the version of the film we watched. So, for this episode, we are returning to our Alpha Video collection again to watch this short. If you missed the last episode, I'll give you a quick description of this video set. In 2016, Alpha Video released a compilation disc entitled Mabel Normand, Queen of Comedy. This DVD collected 5 Mabel Normand shorts spanning 1915 to 1916. The shorts included are Wished on Mabel, Mabel's Willful Way, That Little Band of Gold, Fatty and Mabel Adrift, and our showcase short today, He Did and He Didn't. These shorts are a great glimpse into Mabel Normand's immense comedic talent as well as top-notch chemistry between Mabel and Fatty. Some of the folks we even talk about later, like Al St. John, appear multiple times throughout this DVD set. And that's a pretty cool bonus to know you're getting not just Roscoe, Arbuckle, you're not just getting Mabel Normand, but you're getting Al St. John's, the Joe Boudreau's. Some of the people we're talking about, so you can really get a sense of their talents and their contributions to the film world. Now, the quality of these visuals, of the visuals on this DVD, are decent. Some shorts are better than others. I will not sugarcoat it. Some are pretty bad, which unfortunately includes He Did and He Didn't. But this was a budget compilation, so you're not going to get necessarily that high def and the surround sound and the 4K audio and video. But it's all about the content at the end of the day. And with it being just a standard bare bones DVD disc, it's a great pickup for a budget price, and it's definitely worth it to catch some of these classic shorts. And as with the case with many of the films we chat about here, these are films that are well into public domain and available in a ton of online spots, with YouTube always being the most prominent. No matter how you catch it, though, the quality probably won't be too crystal clear, but it should definitely be checked out if you don't have access to this DVD. So these are definitely movies worth seeing, no matter how you get to them. Now, at this point in the program, I'd normally start digging into the lives of those involved. But since this is a weird episode operating outside of our normal Golden Silence podcast procedures, well, I might as well keep the weirdness going. We're going to start this movie talk with a place, not a person. As I mentioned earlier, Fort Lee, New Jersey will be our focus today. Like many folks out there, I was completely unaware of the importance this town had in the history of the cinemas. But by God, did it have an impact. The movie industry in the U.S. can find its roots running back to Fort Lee. For a short time, it was the motion picture capital of the United States. One of the earliest wheels to get turning came in the form of Thomas Edison and his Black Maria studio in West Orange, New Jersey. This setup would serve as Edison's home and laboratory. It was here, with the help of his assistant William Dixon, that Edison invented the kinetoscope. The industry got its start at the end of the 19th century with the construction of that studio. One of the reasons this area appealed to aspiring filmmakers was cost. New Jersey offered land at cost considerably less than New York City. In 1893, a little bit off, a couple years off there. In 1893, the Black Maria was completed. Construction of the building, which included a tar paper covered dark studio room with a retractable roof, began in December of 1892 and was completed the following year. In early May 1893, at the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences, Edison conducted the world's first public demonstration of film shot using the kinetograph in the Black Maria, with a kinetoscope viewer. The exhibited film showed three people pretending to be blacksmiths. If you were in Fort Lee from roughly 1909 to 1918, you were in the center of the movie world. Hollywood's first film studio opened in 1911, but it took until the early 20s for the West Coast film industry to become well known. Aside from financial reasons, Fort Lee also offered benefits on the aesthetic side of the ledger as well. This comes from writer Laura Kinnery from her February 2019 article entitled, "Was This the U.S.'s First Film Town?" which can be found on bbc.com. She writes, "There was local momentum for sure, but Fort Lee was also camera-ready. The greater borough's natural and man-made landscapes made it the perfect place for picture-making. There were the Palisades' sheer cliffs, an easy stand-in for canyon country, and below them the Hudson River, which could be made to look like a seaside harbor, coastal stretch, or in some cases even an ocean. The top of the Palisades were a mix of wide-open plateau and tall trees that at the right angle resembled the woods of England, as was the case in the obscure 1912 adventure short Robin Hood. Then there was the town itself, with its wood-frame houses, narrow streets, and a small stretch of stone and granite businesses that served as any town USA. Directors even rented horses from a nearby stable for film's many Wild West scenes. With such a wealth of scenic variety and such proximity to a major hub like New York City, Fort Lee appeared to have it made." And as a Pittsburgher, that quote really stood out to me. I can appreciate those feelings towards the Fort Lee area. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has a bustling and successful movie industry that is constantly moving and constantly filming. Some of the most famous movies ever made have come from Pittsburgh. And to be honest, some of not so good movies have come out of Pittsburgh. But in general, a lot of movies come from Pittsburgh. And one of the reasons is, like Fort Lee, there is such a wide variety of terrains, of architecture styles, of vistas, of views, and locales, that movie studios can be really efficient and get a lot of different looks while sticking in one town. So that really connected with me, knowing that film studios and productions got so many looks from Fort Lee, New Jersey, and I know exactly how that actually works. So that was a cool little bit of connection to Pittsburgh, which I always shout out whenever possible. So that is this episode's Pittsburgh shout out. One of the most famous and provocative films made in Fort Lee was Within Our Gates, produced in 1919. It was a response to D.W. Griffith's highly controversial 1915 film Birth of a Nation. It was directed by African-American filmmaker Oscar Micheaux. It is the earliest known and complete black film made by an African-American director and chronicles the fictional story of Sylvia Landry, a black schoolteacher who heads north to raise funds for better schools in the segregated South in the Jim Crow era following the Civil War. It not only dives into the great migration of African Americans from South to the North in hopes of a better life, but it also served as an indictment against racism. Like many boom towns and industries, the breakneck growth couldn't last forever, though. This is where the move to Hollywood really comes to the forefront. As the geographical shift began to prove long-term, Fort Lee and its film magic would drift away. In an article about Fort Lee's history on the New Jersey website, the actual governmental website, www.nj.gov website, we learn more about the final days and productions of the cinematic centerpiece of the film world. The article reads, just as Fort Lee production facilities were gaining strength, Nestor Studios of Bayonne, New Jersey built the first studio in Hollywood, California in 1911. Nestor Studios later merged with Universal Studios. California's more hospitable and cost-effective climate led to the eventual shift of virtually all filmmaking to the West Coast by the 1930s. Fort Lee, the film town once hailed as the center of the U.S. motion picture industry, languished. Stages once filled by Paramount and Universal were leased by independent producers or used as paint shops by scenic artists from Broadway. Most of Fort Lee's film history eventually disappeared, one studio at a time. Now that is a damn shame, to see a place go from such highs and such historical moments drop to such relative obscurity. And like with most things, it's the digging beneath the surface that brings the greatest surprises. Before I started this research and watching and reading, I would never have had any idea the history buried within the town boundaries of Fort Lee, New Jersey. And I hope this episode serves as, a reawakening or reintroduction, I guess, of Fort Lee to the greater movie-loving world out there. Now, with our little Garden State excursion into the realms of Rand McNally concluded, let's return to the human portion of our broadcast. To do that, we will be looking into the life of Al St. John, a.k.a. Fuzzy St. John. At the beginning of the show, I made the wild accusations that we would be sidestepping the stars of this short, but as I thought about it more and reflected a little deeper on it, I might not have been completely honest with you. As we learn about St. John, you'll find a fascinating connection to one Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. But that's getting a little ahead of ourselves, but there is only one way to start a person's bio off right. Alfred St. John was born on September 10, 1892 in Santa Ana, California. His father was Walter St. John and his mother was Nora Nell Arbuckle St. John. Hang on to that name for a little later. Whilst the family's life started in Santa Ana in the 1890s and a brief stint in Pomona, California, the St. Johns would find themselves in Los Angeles by 1910. It was around that time the acting bug would bite the then 17-year-old Al St. John. And it was the stages of the Princess Theater in Los Angeles that he first came to be noticed. You might be wondering how a teen snagged such a sweet gig. Well, knowing one of the big names of the acting troupe certainly helps. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was acting and producing there in the early 1910s. In addition to that, Arbuckle's first wife, Minta Durfee, was also a member of that theater company. So let's rewind a little and circle back to Al's mom, Nora Nell Arbuckle St. John. She was Fatty Arbuckle's sister, which meant Arbuckle was his uncle and his gateway to the silver screen. In fact, St. John's first film appearances came around 1913, with him in roles for Max Sennett's Keystone Studios, where his uncle was doing fantastic work. As Fatty's star rose, St. John was often cast in his films, while also working production jobs behind the camera. And as Arbuckle moved throughout the industry, St. John was not far behind. Even when registering his World War I draft paperwork, we find that he was in New York City with Arbuckle's comic film company. Al St. John often found himself in comedically villainous roles opposite Arbuckle. These roles would find him acting opposite a who's who of silent leading ladies, most often Mabel Normand and Minta Durfee. He would also appear with huge stars on the male side of the ledger, too. In fact, one example is working with Charlie Chaplin in 1914's The Rounders. During his time in New York working with Arbuckle's comic film company, he would even get to work with Buster Keaton. Despite this success, it would seem to be coming to an end, as scandal and legal woes plagued and enveloped his uncle. That would seem to be the obvious conclusion, but it really wasn't the reality. St. John's career would not be slowed down. Even after Fatty's legal unpleasantness, the rotund auteur made films under a pseudonym. It was under the name of William Goodrich that Arbuckle directed St. John as a comic leading man in both silent and sound films. St. John was a funny man, but of slight physical build, coming in at about 5 foot 6 inches tall and 150 pounds. Despite being rather small in stature, he got the most out of his body, with much of his comedy coming in the form of slapstick, pratfalls, acrobatics, and a ton of funny faces. On top of all that, he was a bit of a wizard on the bicycle and the unicycle. But the life of a physical comedian is not all laughs and shenanigans. In his 1960 book, My Wonderful World of Slapstick, Buster Keaton name drops Al St. John. I mean, not the best name drop, but still pretty cool to be name dropped, I suppose, by Buster Keaton. In the book, written by Keaton and Charles Samuels, he writes about how much is involved in a pratfall. He explains, "Even more astonishing to me was discovering how few of them knew the first thing about taking a fall. The ex-Keystone Cop, Al St. John, for example, worked side by side with Roscoe Arbuckle for 5 years without learning one damn thing about protecting himself in a fall. As an old trip and tumble expert myself, I advised St. John to use elbow pads, something he had never heard of until then. He had been using his hands and elbows each time to break his falls. The result was that he was continually suffering." Now, by the 1930s, Al St. John was now Fuzzy St. John, and regularly portraying bearded and scruffy comedic characters. He would become a regular in westerns at the time. In fact, he would be a mainstay and big attraction to moviegoers. He was an especially big draw in Europe. In a career that spanned 41 years, Al St. John would appear in more than 350 films. That's a pretty fantastic run, if I do say so myself. According to the Hollywood Walk of Fame website, which you can find www.walkoffame.com, his career as Fuzzy was just as crucial and critical to his cinematic success as his silent work. The website writes, "Al St. John, in his persona of Fuzzy Q. Jones, basically defined the role and concept of comical sidekick to cowboy heroes from 1930 to 1951. St. John also created a character, Stoney, in the continuing Western film series The Three Musketeers, that was later played by John Wayne. Now, on the personal side of things, he wasn't always as successful. On October 5th, 1914, he married Marion Ball in Los Angeles, California. The marriage would produce a daughter named Mary Jane in 1918. This would be St. John's only child. By 1923, the marriage and family situation had irreparably broken down. Though that marriage was a bit of a bust, by 1926 he was a newlywed once again. That year would see Al married to June Price Pierce, an actress and real estate agent. They would remain married until her passing in 1957. Al was husband number 3, and June was husband number 3 to June, in which she brought along her son Raymond Beach Price, who was aged 5 at the time. According to Al St. John's official website, www.alstjohn.net, his truly was a career that spanned the ages and covered basically every avenue of entertainment people at the time consumed. Throughout his lifetime, he worked in most branches of the entertainment industry, from circus to street artist to theater, vaudeville, and the movies, before he ended the journey as a performer at Traveling Western Reviews, the website writes. Looking back at his life and the sheer volume of quality, that's quantity too, but it was a sheer volume of quality work he contributed to the history of cinema is amazing. And to think, not many people know the name of Al St. John. He is deserving to be known to wider film audiences, and I implore you to check out his work. Now, with those discussions out of the way and our geography and biography lessons behind us, let's say we hop right into this classic Mabel and Fatty short. He did, and he didn't. So, as we get into the movie, let's give you a little bit of pre-show info to kind of set the stage for what we're about to watch, or listen to, I suppose, in this case. He Did and He Didn't was released on January 30th, 1916, and was produced by the Keystone Film Company. It runs at a slim, trim 20 minutes and was directed by Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle and produced by Max Sennett. If you want to learn some interesting facts and a bit of a bio on Max Sennett, tune into our previous episode, The Extra Girl. we delve a little bit into the life of Max Sennett. So do check that out. It was a fun episode to make with a lot of cool stuff to learn. He Didn't stars Arbuckle as the doctor and Mabel Normand as the doctor's wife. They are joined by William Jefferson as the wife's schoolmate and Al St. John as the bounding burglar. As the film progresses, we will dive into some other folks who helped bring this motion picture to life. The film opens by telling us the doctor and his wife are in for their usual evening. Seems straightforward, right? What could possibly go wrong? So we start off in the bedroom with the couple getting dressed up for the evening. The doctor's having a bit of a trouble getting dressed. More specifically, the trouble is coming from his collar. He seems to have lost a pin or something that goes inside the collar for this fancy suit collar. Mabel, his wife, tries to find it, but she fails too. She leaves, and as she heads out, her hubby tells her to send the butler to help look. She does as requested and sends the butler in. Here we get some fun physical comedy between the doctor and the butler. After some shenanigans, he finds the missing piece and finishes up getting dressed. It turns out he had it on him all along. While downstairs, the doctor's wife opens a letter. It's from her old schoolmate, Jack. You see, Jack is on his way to see his childhood friend. She alerts the housemaid that there will be a need for a table set for 3 tonight. After a bit more silliness with the butler and the doc, we are introduced to Jack, the wife's schoolmate, who arrives at the mansion of the doctor and his wife. The schoolmate that will have Arbuckle's doctor in fits is played by William Jefferson, a very presidential-like name for the London-born actor. William Winter Jefferson was born on April 6th or April 25th, 1876 in London, England. Though starting out studying medicine in Germany, he would ultimately follow his father's footsteps by getting into the acting game. In addition to 34-ish on-screen credits, Jefferson would also do quite a bit on the stages too. After his time in the public eye, he would retire to Honolulu, Hawaii in 1928 and would marry his third wife there in 1936. He died in Honolulu on February 10th or 11th, 1946. So Jack has arrived and is ready to make things awkward. He will be staying with the married couple. The butler takes his suitcase and leads him into the magnificent and, for now, bullet-free home. Mabel sees him and runs out to greet him. She pulls him over on the sofa to chat up and catch up on old times. As those two are getting close, the doctor is finishing up getting all snazzy before heading downstairs. FYI, from here on out, I'm just going to call the doctor's wife Mabel. Typing out the doctor's wife over and over and over again is going to drive me crazy. So henceforth, she shall be called Mabel. And as you soon find out, her in-movie name actually is Mabel. So I can do this with zero guilt, just the way I like things. So Jack pulls out a picture Mabel gave him as a child. She had signed the photo from your sweetheart, Mabel. They laugh and talk very close. The doctor is just coming in as they are doing all of this close talking. He does not like what he is seeing, not one bit. But soon Mabel is introducing Jack to her husband, which she takes great pleasure in doing. The doctor sends Jack off with the butler to get settled in his room. With Jack gone, Roscoe throws a fit over the sweetheart picture, and in a pretty jerky move, he rips it up right in front of her. Not cool, not smooth, not anything. Despite this lack of cool, he gets down on his knees and tries to console her and apologize. The two hug, and all seems right with the world. With that unlikableness behind them, we fast forward a bit to dinner. As you watch the screen, the dining room is dark, save for a light over the table. You see all of Mabel and half each of Jack and the doctor. This setup is really super cool. The composition of this scene is fantastic. It was such a great use of lighting and darkness that really plays into the turns the film will soon take. I'll be posting a shot of this scene on the Golden Silence Podcast Instagram just to show how cool I think this is. Hopefully you guys agree, but I think it's pretty rad. As they eat, drink, and be merry, the maid and the butler prepare to take out dinner as a cop looks on, for some reason. On the menu tonight are 3 huge lobsters. I am traditionally not one for eating lobsters straight up. They look terrifying in their natural form, and the boiling of living creatures seems awful, and they seem like a lot of work to gain entry into their tastiest inner bits. So, long story short, I love lobster, just not like this. But rich people dig it, and these folks are about to dig in. Mabel notes that with such a big seafood meal, they will not sleep a wink tonight. But soon they are all chowing down. They eat, unaware of the lame excuse some ne'er-do-wells are going to use to gain entry into the home. This is our first on-screen glimpse of Al St. John and his burglary assistant, Joe Bordeaux. You may or may not recognize the burglar's apprentice in this film. He is played by Joe Bordeaux. He may be familiar since he played the thief in last episode's Wished on Mabel. Not totally sure if it's typecasting or not, but throughout his career he would play many a mischief maker. He would play everything from burglars to conmen. All was not lost, however, since he also had many roles as a police officer too. Bordeaux was born on March 9, 1886 in Pueblo, Colorado. He was active in the film industry from 1914 to 1915. Rewind that a bit. He was active in the film industry from 1914 to 1940, with over 70 movies to his name. He would die on September 10, 1950, at the age of 64. The two burglars go over their plan. St. John goes around back as Bordeaux fakes an injury, crutches and all. The butler helps the injured man in and calls to the doctor. The doctor leaves the table and ushers the man into his home office. Since the burglars are a couple of doofs, it isn't long before the doc sniffs out some shenanigans and kicks the man out. But the damage has been done on two fronts. First, St. John has gained entry via their distraction. And second, and more crucially, Jack and Mabel have had some good dinner table alone time together. Something was dropped, like a napkin or something, and both go under the table to get it. And obviously, this is when the doctor returns to the table, seeing the two of them under the table together. So he goes under just as they come back up. Now, the rest of the meal is spent with the doctor using his suspicious mind to cast suspicious gazes straight at Jack. And because Fatty is a tremendous comic actor, he is really able to convey so much emotion through his facial expressions. And it's not just the goofy faces that Arbuckle can do. He really has great range and shows quite a bit of drama at this point in the film. And things are going to get serious, so this is a great way to transition from laughs to something a little bit darker that kind of ushers in the events soon to come. And after dinner, we find the awkward threesome reading books. Each has their nose buried in a book, except when Jack is trying to converse with Mabel. And these attempts are met with some masterful passive-aggressive conversation blocking by Arbuckle, who is seated in the middle. Soon, Jack decides to retire for the night and makes his way upstairs to bed. Mabel follows closely behind to the steps where she wishes him a good night, and Jack goes up the steps. Incidentally, a little bit off topic, but why should you never, ever trust steps? They're always up to something. Alright, so back to the movie. This is where the film, at least for me, starts to make the turn to the dark side. You see, Arbuckle rushes after Mabel, grabs her, and gives her a stern talking to before shaking her and almost choking her. I totally thought he was going to choke her at this point. It was very off-putting, and I wondered how a comedy guy like Fatty could play a character like this. Mabel doesn't take it well and slaps her husband before snoring upstairs herself. Not too long after, Arbuckle's doctor gets an unexpected call. It's the burglar's compatriot from before. You remember, the one with the crutch. He is calling in a suspiciously timed emergency house call. Come at once, he pleads. 26 Burton Road is the address. The not-so-good doc heads out. He grabs his medical bag and overcoat as an apologetic Mabel makes her way back down. Despite her attempts to settle things and go to sleep happy, her husband is still fuming with jealousy and wants none of it. She tries to help with his coat, but he pulls away. Mabel becomes rather forlorn as he walks out of the house and hops into his car. After he drives off, though, her frown quickly turns upside down as she seemingly dances and bounces up the steps with a smile on her face and a newfound pep in her step. Fascinating, right? The doc arrives at the aforementioned 26 Burton Road. He pulls up to his destination unaware of what is transpiring back at home. After some shenanigans, Jack ends up in Mabel's bedroom, the one he shares with her husband. She hugs Jack lovingly. As they embrace, Jack hears something. That mysterious sound is coming from under the bed. Jack pulls out I believe the doctor's gun, I think it was the doctor's gun, and drags out the bounding burglar himself, Al St. John. Jack shoves the gun in the chest of the thief, but a quick distraction allows the burglar a temporary escape, and he makes for the stairs. This was the result of that earlier crutch-assisted distraction. This bounding burglar was playing a little 4D chess with this diabolical plan. Things get crazy here, though. The action kind of goes off the rails, but in an incredibly fun way. There is so much gunfire over the next couple minutes. So much gunfire. Jack runs after the thief, but a mere chase is not enough. He has to unload so much lead, Dirty Harry and Paul Kersey would blush and say it's a bit much. St. John's character earns the moniker of bounding burglar here. He does some pretty wild jumps and stunts throughout the mansion. One especially cool spot comes from him dangling and spinning from a chandelier, while the never-ending spray of gunfire rains down upon him. I'm not even kidding. Quite unrealistic, if you will. Keep that in mind. At this point, the butler, the maid, and a cop walk into a gunfight. That wasn't the second joke of the episode, but sounds like it, right? Well, actually, all three are hanging out in the kitchen when they hear the commotion in the other area of the house. They run out to see what's going on. Time for another side story. There is no better time than the middle of a big action scene to give a quick biography. So, since no flick is about thieves and burglars is complete without a cop, we should mention Gilbert Eli. He played the policeman in this film, and this section specifically. We saw him briefly earlier, but this is where he really shines and has a little bit of screen presence. He was born in 1858 and died on April 4th, 1920 in Osgood, Indiana. His resume is not nearly as prolific as some other folks in this picture, however. He would only appear in 23 films, mostly shorts from 1914 to 1919. So he runs in all full of authority and vim and vigor, only to get kicked by the chandelier-swinging swindler. This next portion of the action sequence covers much of the house with everyone out inside getting involved. Rooms are entered, guns are fired. It's a fun and well-put-together comedic action scene. As that madness is going down, the doc sees the address he was given was a fake. The house is abandoned. When he realizes this, his first thought is that Mabel double-crossed him. It was all a ruse to get him out of the house so Mabel and Jack can canoodle free of third wheels. He is pissed off and hurries home to exact his terrible vengeance. The fight continues with some gymnastic-quality hops from the springy St. John, and more gunfire. So much gunfire. Still, the burglar tussles a bit with Mabel before making his ultimate escape out a window. A worried Jack attends to the injured Mabel, who is laying in bed. Of course, that's the moment Jack holds the bedridden Mabel is precisely when Arbuckle's doctor comes into the room. Before entering, he picks up his gun and heads into the room. He points the barrel at Jack. Jack realizes what the doc is thinking and pleads his case. The two struggle before Jack is ultimately thrown out the window the burglar just escaped from. He survived the fall, but still, that's pretty much attempted murder on the doc's part. With Jack out of the way, Arbuckle's doctor grabs his wife and violently chokes her out. He looks deep into her eyes as the life slips out of her. She collapses to the ground. With Mabel dead, he nonchalantly steps over her body and leaves the bedroom. But, all is not lost. After he leaves, Mabel starts to move again. She sits up, rubbing her neck. Now she is pissed off and has the gun in her possession. She runs after her husband and shoots. The gunshot-wounded doctor rolls down the ornate staircase. As he's falling, we cut to him falling out of his chair. Once he gets his wits about him, he runs out of the room and up the stairs. He runs into Jack, whom he's surprised has not been tossed out of a window. He then makes his way to the bedroom where he sees a peacefully sleeping Mabel. The two men chat a bit when the doc remembers he had that big old lobster and knew it was going to mess with his sleep. And boy, howdy. The two men laugh and shake hands before Arbuckle, sheepish grin and all, gently closes the door behind him. And it was all a dream. The end. As the film winds up, it seemed only fair to talk a bit about the man who filmed this movie that brought us all together here today. That man is Elgin Leslie, and he was the cameraman. While his work on the film was uncredited, it is generally believed that he was the man behind the camera, and documentation around the production lends credence to his being on board. Leslie was born on June 10, 1883 in Higbee, Missouri. He was one part of a very large family. His work in film would begin in the early 1900s. At this point in time, film credits weren't the most precise things in the world, so it's tough to know exactly which films he was involved in, but he certainly was doing things. One of the early companies he worked for was the American branch of Star Film Company, which was run by Gaston Millet. In 1911, at the age of 28, Leslie became a cameraman for American Wild West, the recently renamed American branch of the Star Film Company, by, like I mentioned before, Gaston Millet, who is the brother of George Millet, who you may or may not have heard of. American Midwest made one reel westerns, most of which are now lost. Leslie isn't known to be credited on any of this film, so it's difficult to determine which ones he actually worked on. According to Wikipedia, Gaston Millet took his film company touring in the South Seas and Asia in the summer of 1912. Leslie joined them in Yokohama in April 1913. He worked there briefly on short documentaries. Again, lacking screen credits, it's difficult to determine exactly which films Leslie himself shot, but likely candidates include A Japanese Funeral, Home Life in Japan, and The Rice Industry in Japan. Leslie would return to the States on May 10, 1913. This is when he would join up with Max Sennett at Keystone Studios. At this time, like I mentioned earlier, credits would be sketchy at best. For Elgin Leslie, his first official credit came for The Waiter's Ball in 1916. But He Did and He Didn't was filmed in 1915. This comes up because in documentation and photographs, Leslie can be seen behind the camera. So for our purposes, we'll say He Did and He Didn't is number one. Does that sound good to you guys out there? When Roscoe Arbuckle started his own company, Leslie remained with Sennett for a few more films, including a few with Al St. John. He would eventually join Arbuckle and the rest of the comic gang in 1918. Here he would do more work with Arbuckle, Buster Keaton, and Al St. John. By 1920, Arbuckle had moved on to feature films, and Buster Keaton took over Comic Film Company and rebranded it Buster Keaton Studios. Keaton retained the services of Elgin Leslie, and the two would work together on 19 shorts and 6 features. The two were instrumental in special effects works of the time as well. Between Keaton's ingenuity and Leslie's camera skill, the two would do really cool and experimental stuff. Effects that would push the limits of what could be done in a time when all special effects had to be done in camera. Elgin Leslie died on February 8, 1944, after a career that spanned the years 1911 to 1928. He was age 61 at the time of his death and was laid to rest in Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. And that was He Did and He Didn't. It's another week where outside review and analysis is few and far between, so I'll have to do my best to convey my thoughts on the movie. I mean, I really dug it. First off, I'm not going to say anything else but that. I really enjoyed it. I appreciated it because it had the laughs and the physical comedy, but it had a cool dark undertones that I wasn't expecting at all. Like I said, it certainly wasn't something I was expecting when the movie started. I had a feeling I was in for a good time. I mean, Fatty Arbuckle and Mabel Normand teaming up at the height of their powers. Of course it's going to be a good time. But I didn't see the dark twists and turns that we ended up getting. And it really speaks a lot to Arbuckle's skill as an actor that he was able to be an equally compelling villain as he was a top-flight comedy guy. He totally had the acting chops to do anything in movies he wanted to. The phases he made in the film, especially during his heel turn, really show a flair for the dramatic. Mabel did some good work in this too, but she was definitely the straight man, so to speak, of this venture, at least to my untrained and novice eyes. She had a few funny gags, but this movie was for sure a fatty showcase, which isn't a bad thing. While the laughs may not have been as plentiful with Mabel Normand, the chemistry between the two leads was crazy good. As I watch more and more fatty Normand flicks, there is a reason these two kill it every time. What they have together is easy to see for anyone, whether you're a movie expert or not. Another sight to behold in this short is the man we mentioned earlier in the bio section, and that would be Al St. John. He took a lot of fun bumps in his short screen time. He was a highly kinetic ball of energy, bouncing from spot to spot, And in conjunction with that, the whole final action bit and gunfight was great fun to watch. Lots of gunfire, incredibly reckless gunfire to be sure, but since it was all a lobster-fueled fever dream, overzealous gunfiring can be forgiven. Now, let's talk about the ending. First, it snookered me. It tricked me. It got me, and I thought it was legit, and I thought Arbuckle's doctor legit choked out his wife. I couldn't believe it, and it was the last thing I expected. It reminded me of Tommy Wiseau and his film The Room. That was a movie I went into cold and enjoyed the heck out of. It was fun and made me laugh like crazy. Like, the movie itself, like, ostensibly, it's a drama, but you have fun watching it, as I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's a fun, wacky adventure of a movie. But then all of a sudden, the end takes a crazy, violent, sad turn. And then to have such a movie that you're having fun and laughing at, to have such a shocking suicide at the end, it really makes that quick turn that you're not expecting. And you're like, did that just happen? And he did and he didn't struck me the same way. It was one type of film before taking the dark and murderous turn that I didn't see coming. But of course, it only ends up being a dream, which in today's entertainment landscape, it's a bit of a cliche. But back in 1916, it wasn't so overdone, if it was even done at all. For as good as the movie was, the quality of the DVD left a bit to be desired. This might have been visually the worst on the set, actually. Some of the versions on YouTube had better video quality. I know perfect high-def video is not to be expected, but for as good as the short was, I wanted to see more of the characters, more of the set, just more. And it was on YouTube where I could get a little bit more of a better view. Now, as we lay this episode to rest, it is time to find out where your favorite silent stars are laid to rest. This is the segment where we join our favorites, cinematic slapstickians, on the other side of the cemetery gates. This is the podcast segment where history, art, and celebrity spectacle converge to form Where Are They Now? Your guide to paying your respects to the film legends that have entertained us so much. After Al St. John left the movies in 1952, he went on tour with various Western shows until his death in 1963. But he made the most of that in-between time. This decade would see him making live appearances for enthusiastic crowds all over the world. These live events and appearances came at a wide variety of locales, from fairs to rodeos and even overseas U.S. military bases. People loved seeing St. John live and in person. He even made it into traveling Wild West shows. On top of all that, he would still make an occasional appearance on television. Some people's careers die the moment they step out of the spotlight. And some, like Al St. John, can reinvent themselves and keep that name in lights long after the heights of a career. All this hard work and touring kept St. John's name in lights, but unfortunately it was a bum ticker that finally brought an end to the seemingly endless career. It was on January 21st, 1963, while on tour with the Tommy Scott Wild West show, that St. John would pass away. From what I can gather, he suffered a massive heart attack at a motel in Lyons, Georgia. He was making another public appearance when the tragedy struck. After a private funeral service in Lyons, the body of Al St. John was moved to Macon, Georgia for cremation. His ashes were then moved to the town of Homosassa Springs, Florida, where they were scattered, passed out, or otherwise distributed amongst St. John's residents, the Double F Ranch. While Al St. John's corporeal form may be scattered to the whims of Mother Nature, there is another way to connect with the long-gone funny man. Like many of the folks we chat about here, his career was such a success that he was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. This major career recognition was awarded on February 8, 1960. This was cool because many of the silent stars who received stars wouldn't always live long enough to enjoy the moment. But St. John was lucky enough to have a long enough life and career to be around for the big moment. And if any of you listeners find yourself on the West Coast and want to swing by his star, you just have to go to 6313 Hollywood Boulevard and pay your respects to the legendary funny man. And with all that fun out of the way, this seems like a good time to wrap this bad boy up and start digesting that lobster. We hope you enjoyed a second Mabel-centric movie episode in a row, and we also hope you enjoyed your dive into the unsung heroes of He Did and He Didn't. There are so many phenomenal talents and locations that are always fun taking a look at. Who are some of your favorite hidden talents in the silent world? And before we make our way out of the theater, just a quick reminder to swing by our Instagram and or Twitter and let us know what you thought of this episode. Let us know some of your favorite unsung heroes of the film industry. Who do you want to see us cover in the future? Do you have a favorite film town? We here are constantly getting exposed to new and wondrous films, people, and locations, and want to know where to look next. You can do all of that at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and at Golden Silence 1 on Twitter. And again, if you ingest our show via Apple Podcast or Spotify, please subscribe, rate, review. It helps us like crazy, and we love hearing your thoughts. We ultra mega appreciate all of your support, and seeing how much you folks out there are listening only makes us want to produce more cool infotainment for all of you. All that being said, a big thank you goes out to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening. And as we always say here, don't ever forget, the silents are golden, and the talkies are just a fad. That is not the end of the episode yet. If you are still listening, I appreciate it. Taking a little detour, a little post-show bonus, not a commercial, not a public service announcement, not a... I guess you could say it's a call to action. I just wanted to explain a little bit of the delay, the one-day delay on this episode, and why it occurred. So, March 4th, the show comes out on Saturdays, traditionally, and for this episode, it was going to come out on a Saturday. I had recorded the episode about a week earlier, and was just waiting for it to release, but an event happened on March 4th that I wanted to chat about here, and wanted to discuss with all of you, and so took a little bit of time to put it back into the episode. So here is the addendum to this episode. On March 4th, it was the 100th anniversary to the day of the release of Nosferatu. And here in Pittsburgh, along with a lot of other cities from what I saw online, we had a special event with Nosferatu. It was a screening of Nosferatu with a live original accompaniment by the great, fantastic, and talented Tom Roberts. Now, this event was put on by the Pittsburgh Silent Film Society, headed by Chad Hunter. Now, what was cool about this was it was for March 4th, the 100th anniversary. But the tickets sold so fast, and it proved so popular that they had to add a second day to it. So it ran also on March 5th. And just seeing that made me really, really happy that silent films are still popular. There's still something people want to see. Some maybe more than others. But just the fact that people bought so many tickets so fast that other shows had to be added. And all around the world, through Twitter and Instagram and stuff, I see awesome events in other countries and other states and other towns that people are putting on to showcase silent film history. And just all I can speak to is Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh here, we had Nosferatu. In a few weeks, it's the Japanese Film Festival here in Pittsburgh. So Row House Cinema is going to be running a silent Japanese film. And then maybe a month or so after that, The Kid with a live musical accompaniment is going to be played again at the Harris Theater. And then after that, Nanook of the North is going to be celebrating its 100th anniversary at Harris Theater with a presentation. And it just warms my heart and really excites me that silent films are still strong. Who would have thought that when these movies were being made that they didn't think people would care after a couple months. That's why so many of these films are lost. But the fact that 100 years later, in most cases, people are still loving these films and still buying tickets and still buying t-shirts and still buying DVDs to watch these things is amazing. And I just want to say, if you have things similar to the Pittsburgh Silent Film Society in your town, in your state, in your country, support them. If you see a silent film being screened, support it. Show it with your money. Show it with your time. They are just great events, and it just is amazing to see the support that these movies still get after all this time. And the event we here at the Golden Silence podcast attended on Friday night, March 4th, was so much fun and so fantastic. Getting to hear how the film was made, getting to hear an amazing original score by Tom Roberts. It really made a lasting effect on me, and I'm sure people that have only in passing seen Nosferatu, it really showed. People loved it. People were cheering for it. People were loving the score. It was just a great night all around, and it just makes me happy to see that people still love these films and still support them. And I want everyone out there to support these films. I love the support my podcast gets. This little show that I don't know what I'm doing on is getting supported, and I know people out there really support these movies. So keep on doing it. Keep on buying tickets. Keep on going. Keep on talking about it. And let's all love silent films for another 100 years. Talk to you later, guys.